Ye Engzan stood at the door of the Civil Affairs Bureau. Today she wore a white t-shirt and a pair of dark jeans, a black backpack on her back, and her long black hair tied into the ponytail. The small white face is tender as if it can pinch water out, and the eyes are like dolls, round and big, clear and clean, with the spirit of spirit. Xiao Qi has a straight nose and moderately thick lips. The delicate looks and this outfit make the whole look particularly clean and neat. Although she is not a natural beauty, she is charming and charming. No matter where she goes or where she goes, she can attract countless lights. An hour passed, and Mu Rufeng, the fiancé who was going to get a marriage certificate with her, had not yet appeared. She could not answer phone calls or text messages. This made her very irritable, unprecedented. Mu Rufeng is not an unexplained man. He will not show up for no reason. If something happens temporarily, he will definitely call and say something. However, he doesn't have a text message now. What is going on? At this moment, a Land Rover stopped in front of her, and the man she had waited for an hour got out of the driver's seat. Looking at Mu Rufeng, who was long overdue, Ye Engzan jogged in the past, holding his arm affectionately, his big beautiful eyes bent into crescent shape, and said with a smile, "Why are you here now, do you know? I waited for you for an hour. What did you do just now? Don't call me. Do you know, how long will the Civil Affairs Bureau close? An xin. I have something to say to you." Mu Rufeng looked at Ye Engzan's delicate face like a ceramic doll, and couldn't bear to say it when his stomach was full. Ye Engzan smiled, "What do you want to say? Why are you hesitating? It's not like your character." Just when Mu Rufeng didn't know where to start, the door of the passenger seat was opened, and a familiar figure came down from above. "Xia Yunlu, why are you here?" Ye Engzan frowned slightly looking at the woman who appeared suddenly. Xia Yunlu wore a tight-fitting sling miniskirt today, with big golden wavy curly hair casually placed on her shoulders, and her face was covered with exquisite makeup, which made her beautiful facial features even more seductive. Xia Yunlu's lips twitched slightly, and she glanced at Ye Engzan with a sneer, and waved Ye Engzan's hand holding Mu Rufeng's arm away. Instead, she leaned her head on his shoulder and said with a smile, "Are you Feng? Since you don't okay, then I will tell you. Ye Engzan, tell you the good news, I'm with Rufeng. He won't get the certificate with you today." Ye Engzan pulled Xia Yunlu away from Mu Rufeng, and said angrily, "Is your head broken? When is it your turn to speak here?" Xia Yunlu was staggered by Ye Engzan and almost fell to the ground. Seeing that Mu Rufeng didn't care about herself, Xia Yunlu bit her lip, came to him again, and shook his arm vigorously. "Rufeng, you are talking. Don't forget what you promised me? My stomach, there are your children in it." Mu Rufeng glanced at Xia Yunlu, gritted his teeth, and then said to Ye Engzan, "Engzan, let's break up. I don't love you anymore, I love Yunlu. From now on, we still don't want to meet again." Ye Engzan glanced at Mu Rufeng, "I'll give you a chance to take back what you just said." Ye Engzan felt uncomfortable for a while, but Mu Rufeng lowered his head and could only utter 3 words with difficulty, "I'm sorry." The man is tall, with a bright and white face with a sharp and angular coldness, a straight nose, black and deep eyes, and a charming color. In a seemingly calm hidden under the eyes are sharp eyes like fake, thick eyebrows, and beautiful lips, all of which exaggerate nobility and elegance. Isn't he an uncle 6 years older than Mu Rufeng, now Mu Biting, the head of the Mu group? Mu Biting is just a fascination with the outside world. Everyone knows that he is 30 years old this year. He was not born to the wife of Mu Huajian, the former head of the Mu family. As for who he came from, no one knows. Because Mu Huajian protected him very well, no matter how the outside world checked, he couldn't find out his traces of spiders and horses, as if he had landed out of thin air. 10 years ago, he took over the Mushy Group and became the president of the Mushy Group, bringing the Mushy Group, which was almost liquidated, back to life and becoming the leader of Jincheng's business. According to legend, his methods are vicious, ruthless, and unscrupulous to achieve his goals. Just these legends, even 10 days and 10 nights can't be finished. However, this is limited to legends. Yet Engzan doesn't know what the facts are. For this uncle, she also met when she was in love with Mu Rufeng. She would always remember that the first time she saw him was in July last year, a hot summer day. She sat opposite him, clearly separated by a dining table. But I felt like I was in an ice cellar, shivering coldly. After that, she had a sense of fear for this man inexplicably. Not only her, but everyone in the Mu family was trembling when they saw him, and looked cautious, as if he was a king over the world, looking down on sentient beings, and they were just a humble dust in front of him. Yet Engzan didn't expect to meet Mu Baiting here. Looking at Mu Baiting, an evil thought suddenly rose in her heart. Standing at the door of the Civil Affairs Bureau, Mu Baiting felt Yet Engzan's gaze projected on him. He just scanned Yet Engzan lightly, and then looked at the door for a while, then looked down at his watch. There was no trace of coldness. The eyes of the temperature floated a little impatient, and he was ready to leave. Yet Engzan didn't want him to leave, grabbed his arm, and said directly without even thinking, "Uncle, no, it's Mu Baiting, no. Yet Engzan changed several titles in a row. But I don't think anything is right. The name is Uncle, it seems that the generation is wrong, the name is Mu Baiting, and the two seem to be young." Yen thought about it, and finally thought of a name that is not verbal and more appropriate. "Uncle, shall we get married? I have everything. No wedding, no dowry, I just want to marry you." Mu Baiting raised his eyebrows, and his thin lips slowly curled up, revealing a beautiful arc, as if a trace of mockery flashed in his eyes. "Why should I marry you?" Yet Engzan hardly thought about it, and without thinking, she blurted out, "Just because I am a woman, you are a man, wouldn't a man still marry a man if he doesn't marry a woman? What's more, let's take pity for the same illness today. When the man put the pigeons off, it's all here today anyway, so why bother to go for nothing?" When saying these things to Mu Baiting, all Yet Engzan thoughts were how to avenge the dog men and women Mu Rufeng and Xia Yunlu. Since they don't let her get better, then they don't want to get better too. Anyway, whoever is marrying is not marrying. The uncle who married Mu Rufeng happened to live under the same roof, so that the dog and man would call themselves aunts every day, so that they would not be angry with them, and they would be killed. At the moment when Yet Engzan took Mu Baiting's arm, Mu Baiting, who had been sitting in the seat of the commercial vehicle, helped Pete get out of it and came quickly. Mu Baiting approached him and shouted respectfully, "Mr. Mu, I will pull her away." Mu Baiting did not answer, but raised the hand with the watch, and tapped the watch screen with his slender finger. After 10 years as a special helper for Mu Baiting, Pete knew what the boss meant with just one action. He hurriedly took out his mobile phone and broadcasted a series of phone numbers. The phone was connected as soon as he dialed. Not knowing what the person opposite said, Pete's face changed drastically, and he hung up the phone after looking at Mu Baiting. Pete looked at Mu Baiting, and after a while, he said, "Mr. Mu, Su Yuexin has escaped from marriage." As soon as Pete's voice fell, Yet Engzan immediately felt that the surrounding air had dropped several degrees in an instant. The sun was shining brightly, but she felt cold and wind. Immediately withdraw all funds invested in the Sua family, and within 3 days, let the Sua family disappear in Jincheng. Mu Baiting's thin lips opened slightly, and his words were colder and more ruthless than his breath. "I'm going to do it now. Then this certificate today." At this point, Pete glanced at Yet Engzan subconsciously. Yen couldn't help but swallowed her saliva. She straightened her barely well-developed and smiled sweetly at them. A pair of big doll-like eyes bent into a crescent shape, casting a sweetness from her bones, making her look like freshly baked dessert. "I can't help but want to try it." "Go." Mu Baiting gave Yet Engzan a cold look, then turned and walked into the Civil Affairs Bureau. Yet Engzan stood there dumbfounded, and did not respond for a long time. "You won't go in yet?" Pete didn't expect that the always calm and ruthless boss would randomly find a woman to marry at the door of the Civil Affairs Bureau. However, since it was the decision of the big boss, he naturally had no reason to take care of it. "Oh." Ye Engzan nodded stupidly. He didn't expect that, he agreed so easily and jogged to follow. The whole process of obtaining the certificate was really simple. It didn't take half an hour. For 50 yuan, she got the certificate with a man who had only met each other. ALAP hour. Great. Woo of you. Bitches, wait and see, I must let you look good. Took the red marriage certificate, leave peace of mind is too excited beyond words to describe it, I had to keep pushing the red books in my hands. Mu Biting glanced at her childish behavior blankly, and walked towards the black business car parked at the door. "Uncle, where are you going?" Ye Engzan hurriedly chased him, grabbing his arm and not letting him leave. Mu Biting turned his head, his cold eyes without any warmth glanced at her faintly, his thin lips pressed tightly, as if he had no intention of speaking. Ye Engzan opened his mouth and was about to say something when the phone in his bag rang desperately. Ye Engzan glanced at Mu Biting, let go of his arm, took out the mobile phone in the bag, and Mu Biting didn't hesitate to get in her commercial car and leave when she let go. Ye Engzan bit her lip, glanced at the caller ID, and answered the call impatiently, "Hey." Not knowing what the person on the phone said, her face changed a lot, and after hung up the phone in a hurry, she stopped a taxi and drove home. As soon as I walked to the door of the house, I saw that the door of the house was wide open, and a group of strangers in the clothes of the moving company moved his family's things outside regardless of their parents' obstruction. Her mother stood in the middle of the living room with her head bowed and wept silently. Her father followed behind the people from the moving company by himself. Whenever they moved something, he snatched it from their hands and put it back in place. While busy, I didn't forget to shout at them, "You puppies, get out of here. This is my home. It's not your turn to go wild here." Xia Yunlu, who was standing at the door facing the door, didn't even notice Ye Engzan was standing behind her, and said disdainfully, "Your home? What a joke! I have lived Xia Yunlu for more than 20 years, and I have never seen you so shameless. People who occupy other people's things are taken for granted. I tell you that the marriage contract between Ye Engzan and Mu Rufeng has been cancelled, and you are not eligible to live in this house anymore. Pack your things sensibly and get out. Otherwise, I will treat you your welcome." Father Ye took a deep breath, dropped the stool in his hand to the ground in surprise, and screamed in a sharp voice, "Cancel the engagement? Why? Why? We have been with him since the age of 17 for 3 years, so why should he say cancel and cancel? No, we won't agree." Xia Yunlu sneered, "Ha, it really is a shameless family. They have all cancelled their marriage contract, and they are so clingy that they refuse to let it go." Ye Engzan, who was standing behind her, couldn't listen anymore, stepped directly into the door and slammed the security door up. Xia Yunlu was horrified by the loud sound. She hurriedly looked back and saw that it was Ye Engzan, but the panic on her face disappeared. She immediately changed to the triumphant look just now. Ye Engzan suppressed his anger, and said coldly, "Xia Yunlu, let the person with you get out of here immediately, otherwise I'm not polite to you." Xia Yunlu put her hands on her chest and squinted at Ye Engzan with disdain. "Ye Engzan, you finally showed up? I thought you were afraid to show up in front of me." Ye Engzan was unwilling to show weakness and immediately fought back, "What, I dare not. I am upright, unlike some people, I have to lose the face of a woman. A good woman is improper and wants to be a junior." Not only is he not ashamed, but he quotes, "I'm proud." "Xia Yunlu, let me tell you, this is my home, we don't welcome you, you go right away, where do you go from here?" Xia Yunlu looked at Ye Engzan's lips and smiled, took out a neatly folded document from her handbag, and opened it in front of Ye Engzan, this is a rental contract. If you have a brain, you should remember that this house is like a maple for you. Rented. Now, the two of you are okay, I naturally have the right to take back the house. Tell you, now I am the hostess of the house, you will immediately take your cheating parents to get out, otherwise throw you out with luggage. Ye Engzan looked at the rental contract in Xia Yunlu's hand, and got stuck in his throat. He couldn't swallow it, and he couldn't spit it out. It was extremely uncomfortable. Father Ye pushed Ye Engzan away and avoided the rental contract in Xia Yunlu's hands. He opened his eyes wide and carefully read it back and forth. Although he didn't believe it was true, the facts lay before him. He couldn't help but believe it. This is impossible, how is this possible? An Xin, you really broke up with Rufeng? How is this possible? Didn't you go to get the certificate just now? Ye Engzan's momentum instantly weakened by half. Don't worry, we won't be lazy here, give me 1 day, we will find a good house and move out immediately. No, you immediately move out for me. Xia Yunlu shook her head with a firm attitude. Ye Engzan bit her lip and took a deep breath. She didn't want to bow her head in front of the enemy, so she said, Mom and Dad, clean things up, we move right away. I don't move, kill or die. This is my house, why should I move? I don't move. If you want to move, you move by yourself, and I won't move. Ye Mu didn't have time to react. Father Ye suddenly sat down on the ground and started crying in spite of his image. Seeing his father playing rogue, Ye Engzan was suddenly speechless. Father Ye continued to cry with snot and tears, Ye Engzan, you stinky girl, I raised you for 20 years in vain, and I finally lived in a big house. It was ruined by you, and you returned my house. Return my wealthy son-in-law. I won't go, I won't go, I want to live in a big house. Mom, I'll pack things with you. If he wants to cry, let him cry enough. Ye Engzan didn't want to care about his ineffective father, and directly took the mother who was still crying silently and started to pack things. Don't move, show me it, it's not theirs, don't even want to take away any of them. Xia Yunlu sat down on the sofa, completely acting like a hostess. The employees of the moving company who were still busy just now stopped moving, guarding the door like a door god, fearing that they would move things that did not belong to them. Ye Engzan and Ye Mu moved very fast, and they had everything cleaned and installed in less than an hour. They didn't have much stuff, just a few clothes and some simple daily necessities. This house, including the furniture and home appliances in this house, all belonged to Mu Rufeng, and she wouldn't want one. Dad, if you don't leave, then Mom and I will leave. Seeing Father Ye still sitting on the ground crying, Ye Engzan had to give an ultimatum. You stinky girl, I asked you to climb on Mu Rufeng's bed and asked you to give her a baby first. You don't listen. If you have a baby, doesn't Mu's family belong to you anymore? My house is gone. I have lived for decades, and I have never lived in such a good house. It's all you stinky girl, you just deliberately don't want me to feel better. Ye's father nagged, while following he got up on the ground, with a look of hate that iron can't make steel, he wished to send Ye Engzan to Mu Rufeng's bed immediately. Dad, if you say something like this again, don't follow us, leave it alone. Ye Engzan angrily dropped a word, not wanting to look at this hopeless dad again, pretending to be big. The red, white and blue plastic bags and Ye Mu left together. Although Father Ye didn't want to leave the home where he had lived for 3 years, he didn't want to throw away the daughter who would bring him glory and wealth in the future, so he had to quickly follow along. While Ye Engzan was standing at the elevator entrance and waiting for the elevator, Xia Yunlu walked over intending high-heeled shoes, blocked the elevator door, attached herself to Ye Engzan, put her mouth to her ear, and said triumphantly, Ye Engzan, you have not been my opponent for a long time. You and Rufeng have been with you for 3 years, of which 2 years have been with me. Do you know where the two of us have the most understanding? It is the bed. Rufeng said yes, she likes me in bed the most. I am the woman who can satisfy him the most among his many women. Yet Engzan, do you know where you fail? You fail in bed if you fail. A man, he can have no career, there is no money, no woman, but he must not have a sexual partner. You can't satisfy even the most basic desires of a man, and you are not a complete woman. He said, directly took out the phone and turned out the photo. Put it in front of Ye Engzan, and continue to say, Ye Engzan, have you never seen Rufeng so satisfied? And I have seen it for 2 years. Ye Engzan looked at her mobile phone, and saw that all on her mobile phone were all pornographic photos she hadn't seen at the door of the Civil Affairs Bureau today. The degree of fiery and boldness was almost comparable island action movie, there is no mosaic yet. And Mu Rufeng's coquettish expression is completely the satisfaction of a man's desire to get vented. Shameless. Yet Engzan's pretty face flushed, and he didn't know if he was angry or was ashamed of seeing this restricted level thing. Anyway, it was completely red. The elevator opened at this time. Ye Engzan pushed aside Xia Yunluo who was blocking the elevator door, and walked into the elevator with a salute in his hand. Ye father and Ye mother hurried to keep up. The elevator door slowly closed, and Xia Yunluo's triumphant look finally disappeared completely. Ye Engzan's silver teeth clenched tightly, and her chest was violently up and down. Father Ye leaned on the elevator wall, twitching heartily, "An Xin, where are we going? It's getting dark. Are we going to sleep on the street today? Look for a hotel today. Find a house tomorrow." Ye Engzan turned her back to Father Ye and clenched her small hands into fists. The humiliation Xia Yunluo brought to her today, Ye Engzan, she has all firmly in mind and engraved in her mind. One day, she will pat her proud face with her 37size shoes, and let her call her aunt forever. Mu Biting will be her backer in the future. With the help of Hong Benben, she still doesn't believe it, she can't get Mu Biting. For this breath, she gave it up. Yet Engzan has always been the kind of person whose heart is not as good as action, and once he makes up his mind, he doesn't shrink back. Therefore, after Ye Engzan found the cheapest hotel to settle in his parents, he made a box lunch for Mu Biting himself, and then took a car to the Mu Group. This is not the first time she has come to the Mu Group. Mu Rufeng is a department manager of the Mu Group. She used to come here often, so the people in the lobby basically knew her. It was to find Mu Rufeng, but did not stop her. Ye Engzan got on the elevator and went straight to 33 Arm, the president's exclusive office floor. Ye Engzan was stunned when she got out of the elevator with the bento in her hands. Because there are no other departments on the 33rd floor, there is only a president's office, a special assistant office, and a general secretary's office, so it looks very empty, so empty that a light cough can be echoed. She was also very quiet, so quiet that she could almost hear her breathing. Ye Engzan looked around, and at a glance she saw the 5 huge words of the president running the company. Without thinking, she walked directly toward the president running the company. As soon as I walked to the door of the president's office was suddenly opened from inside. A tall beauty was stunned when she saw Ye Engzan, then gently closed the door, blocking Ye Engzan's path, and said displeasedly, "Miss, this is the office of the president. No one can enter without the permission of the president. Please leave." Ye Engzan held the lunch box in both hands and smiled sweetly at the beauty in front of her. "I am your wife of the president, I am here to give my husband a lunch box, please trouble the pretty sister to let me in." After hearing her words, the beauty was stunned, a trace of disdain flashed deep in her eyes, then she walked to her desk outside the president's office and pressed the inside line, "Is the security room? Someone is making trouble outside the president's office, you send someone come up and take her away." Ye Engzan didn't care much when the situation was not right. Before the beauty could put down the phone, she ran away. However, instead of running to the elevator, she rushed directly into the president's office. The moment the door was slammed open by her forcefully, time seemed to stop there. The beautiful secretary holding the phone was stunned, and Pete, who was discussing with Mu Biting in the office, was stunned. Even Mu Biting, who had always been calm and self-sufficient, looked up at her. Seeing both Pete and Mu Biting looking at him, Ye Engzan touched his head embarrassedly. Haha, I'm sorry, I'm unintentional. The beauty secretary immediately reacted, put down the phone and rushed in. When she saw Mu Biting's cold face, she hurriedly said, President, I'm sorry, this lady suddenly broke in when I called the security room. I will take her away immediately. Before the beauty secretary started, Ye Engzan hurriedly ran behind Mu Biting's desk and put the lunch in his hand on the table in front of him. Uncle, I'm bringing you food, don't rush, I'm out. People have worked so hard to cook for you, you have to taste whatever you want. Mu Biting looked at the important documents she had pressed under the bento, his face remained unchanged, and the temperature under his eyes dropped a few degrees. Perceiving Mu Biting's displeasure, Pete hurriedly got up and pulled out the documents under the bento, respectfully and politely, Madam, the President has very important things to deal with now. Why not let the driver take you home? After listening to Pete's words, the beauty secretary didn't react for a long time. This woman? Is this woman really the President's wife? How can such a high-end president marry this wild girl who doesn't know a little bit of rules? Didn't the President's wife be Su Yuexin, the daughter of the Su family? Ye Engzan came here, so why would he just go back like this, squatting down, holding Mu Biting's arm, rubbing his head on it? Uncle, don't drive me away, okay? If you have important things now, I will wait for you in the lounge next to you, or wait for you outside. I want to have dinner with you. Ye Engzan's bold move made Pete's jaw almost fall. This. Doesn't the President's wife know that their President has a cleanliness? Look at her dirty look, when it's over, the President must be angry. Pete coughed and bit his scalp and said, Madam, I'll take you back first. The President is very busy now. No. Ye Engzan shook his head without hesitation, as if Mu Biting would not give up today without eating her lunch. Mu Biting's thin lips were tightly pressed into a line, and he pulled his arm out of her claws, then took out the paper on the table, and carefully wiped the place Ye Engzan had touched just now. Seeing Mu Biting like this, Pete was startled in a cold sweat. Before Ye Engzan was thrown away by Mu Biting, he turned around and said to the beauty secretary, Judy, please get my wife out. Then send a car to home. I don't want to go back. Ye Engzan ignored Pete's good intentions, and clung to Mu Biting's leather chair. Pete couldn't do it in a hurry, and was about to speak, when their president said at this time, you go out. Pete let out a sigh of relief, nodded towards Ye Engzan, turned and walked outside the door. Judy stood in place, her teeth biting her lower lip, gave Ye Engzan an unwilling look, then turned and followed Pete away. As the busy people waited to leave, Ye Engzan let go of her hand grasping the leather chair, opened the bento cautiously, and a scent of rice immediately came to her nose. Ye Engzan took out one of the dishes and put it on the desk, then picked up one of the dishes with chopsticks and handed it to Mu Biting's mouth. Uncle, this is a bento I made by myself. Try it and see. Does it taste good? If it doesn't, I will improve it. Mu Biting lowered his eyes and glanced at the vegetables in the lunchbox. A stir-fried Chinese cabbage, a green pepper with beef, and a tomato scrambled egg. No matter how the taste is, at least the appearance is still very good, and it is very appetizing at first sight. Seeing that Mu Biting was only looking at the food in the lunchbox, and ignored the food he had caught next to his mouth, Ye Engzan narrowed his eyes and laughed, Uncle, eat. Looking at her crystal clear eyes, Mu Biting opened her mouth awkwardly, and ate the food she had brought to her mouth. He looks elegant when eating, with his mouth closed, chewing slowly, and even the swallowing movements are so beautiful. Seeing him eating, Ye Engzan immediately increased her confidence. While continuing to feed him, she muttered to herself, let's eat first, and then drink it hot. But I personally cook it for you. 2 full hours. It took me almost 3 hours from grocery shopping, to cooking, to stir-frying. I was busy until dark. Fortunately, I know you must not be home at this time, otherwise you will definitely run for nothing. Mu Baiting didn't speak, yet Engzan took a bite, and he took a bite. The cold gaze remained on her small chattering mouth, and the bottomless eyes were silent and terrifying. Yet Engzan kept talking like that. During the whole meal, she heard her chattering by herself, but Mu Baiting remained silent all the time, eating the food she brought to his mouth. Finally, under Yet Engzan's fatigue bombardment, the lunch was finished. After feeding Mu Baiting after eating, Yet Engzan took out the paper on Mu Baiting's desk, and very affectionately wiped the invisible oil stains on his mouth. While wiping, he blinked the pair of big watery eyes, asked expectantly, "Uncle, what do you think of the taste?" Mu Baiting said, "The wedding is in half a month." Yet Engzan hurriedly waved her little hand, "No, no, no, as I said, there is no need for a wedding is just a formality, it doesn't matter whether it is there or not." Mu Baiting patiently spoke again, "Mu Rufeng's wedding is half a month away." "Wh? What?" Yet Engzan stared at him blankly. After a long time, he still remembered her? She thought she was just a little transparent. They had only seen her once. He was very busy and would definitely not have an impression of her. If he remembers her, doesn't he also know his purpose of marrying him? Thinking of this, Yet Engzan suddenly felt embarrassed after the conspiracy was seen through. However, that was only a moment, and she was well hidden soon. Anyway, if everything is done and all the certificates are received, there is no room for turning back. No matter how she wants to make a good-looking man and a dog. She wants them to know that she, Yet Engzan, is not so bully. Mu Baiting pursed his lips, glanced at her faintly, and ignored her. He curled up his right index finger and knocked gently on the desk. The office door that was closed just now was immediately opened by Pete from the outside. "What order?" "Send her home." Mu Baiting spit out 6 words briefly. Although what he said was simple, Pete understood that he was talking about home, not it as Yet Engzan's own home, but Mu Baiting's home in a villa on the hillside. The president has never let a woman live in that house. Yet Engzan is the first one. Does this mean that the president treats her differently from other women? This thought just flashed through Pete's mind. He has always been a highly efficient subordinate, and at Mu Baiting's order, he immediately gestured towards Yet Engzan. Yet Engzan squatted next to Mu Baiting, took his arm, and said with a smile, "Uncle, what time do you get off work? Or should I stay with you?" "Madam, the president is going to discuss business tonight." As soon as Pete finished speaking, Mu Baiting's cold and sharp eyes swept towards him coldly. "I'm sorry." Peter realized that he had failed to speak, and bowed his head in shame. "Talking about business? How long will it take? When will you come back? May I make you a midnight snack?" Yet Engzan smiled and looked at Mu Baiting, and it was full of curiosity. She is now fighting for revenge. She doesn't want the face of a woman completely. How long did she need to please a man like this? When I talked with Mu Rufeng about friends, Mu Rufeng was the first to pursue her. After a full year, she agreed. She gave Mu Rufeng all her youthful 2 years. Today, she did not expect that she needed to please a man to deal with him. This time, Pete lowered his head. Without Mu Baiting's order, he was afraid to speak. Mu Baiting looked down at her smiling face, his eyes were still so cold, there was no temperature at all. When he watched, Yet Engzan suddenly felt a cold wind, and a chill came from the solace of his feet to his heart. Yet Engzan was obviously afraid of him to death, and Yet Engzan had to ignore it, bit the bullet and said grinningly, "Let's talk, we are husband and wife, as a wife, caring about her husband is a matter of course." Mu Baiting retracted his gaze from her and shouted, "Pete!" Pete struck a sharp spirit, and said hurriedly, "Madam, please leave with me." "Okay." Yet Engzan pursed his red lips, had to stand up unwillingly, and walk slowly towards Pete at the door in 3 steps. "Madam, let's go." Pete leaned his body to make way for Ye Engzan. "Don't talk too late, drinking less, drinking too much is not good for your health." Ye Engzan stood at the door, turned his head, and looked at Mu Biting pitifully with his watery eyes, like that. It's like being aggrieved by a puppy abandoned by the owner. Looking at her, Mu Biting's thin lips were tightly pressed into a line, with waves flowing under his eyes, and finally he was calm. "Uncle, I'm leaving. Bye." Ye Engzan was a little discouraged when he saw that he was talking all by himself, and he said a word from beginning to end. After waving to her, he followed Pete with the lunchbox. When the office door was closed, Mu Biting continued to look down at the files on the desk, as if Ye Engzan had never been here. Outside the door, Ye Engzan was holding a lunchbox in her hand and followed Pete. When passing by Judy's office, Judy nodded at her reluctantly, which was regarded as a greeting.